Hello and welcome to another edition of Final Cut Pro Help Live. My name is Jared Ewing. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you so much to everyone that's been sending in questions. I hope we've been getting you answers that are helpful there, and we have a couple that I wanted to talk about today, specifically two kind of general topics, and we'll dive into some really detailed things. The first one is going to be an error message that comes up. And the error message is, I believe, 10,008 or 100008. Looks like this. Such an annoying error to come up and see. So we're going to talk about that error message. Someone was getting that, and I'll give you some pointers and direction on that. It's, these kind of errors are unique to everyone, so there's not going to be a one solution fits all, but I'll hopefully give you some direction that can help out. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is this clip that someone sent me where they're recording in a car that is driving. It is not on a slow road, it's on a faster road, so there's a lot of car noise, there's some engine noise, and they wanted some tips on how to remove that background noise. So I'll give a couple tips and give you some direction on where to go with that and working with audio. So the first thing is this error message that you may see when you try to share a final project, which is 10008, and render video frame failed. You can see in the message there. If you get some kind of an alert like this and your share has failed, there's a number of things that can cause it. Now in this error message, the one that this user is getting specifically, they don't even get a frame number listed in the error. So they're not getting any help in this error and in a direction of where to go. If you get this error and it actually has some additional numbers, you might see a specific frame number, and that's the Final Cut in the error trying to tell you this is the bad frame that we've found when trying to share the project. If you see a frame number, that's the first place to start because that tells you exactly where in your project you're having a problem. So back here inside of Final Cut Pro, you have a number of things on your project here, and when you share it out, normally in the middle here you see the time code listed. You can actually click on this to go to a specific frame and kind of navigate around. If you control click or right click on it, you can get some more options there as well with the time code. If you go into your preferences using Command comma, or you can go up to the Final Cut menu and go to preferences. I like to use Command comma just to jump right to it. In here, you have a couple options for how to display that time code. So under the General tab, the first option says Time Display. And right now it's set to hours, minutes, seconds, frames. Now in those error messages, you might get a very specific frame number telling you exactly which frame has the error. So change this time display to frames. And now notice in the middle of Final Cut here, instead of getting the time code, I'm getting the frame number that I'm currently on, which happens to be a 309. So if I'm told that the bad frame maybe is around 822, we'll say, I'll just jump right to one of them. If I know that there's a bad frame in there, which actually I can see some glitches up here, so this is a bad frame. There's some distortion, some green artifacts and stuff. So this tells me at 822, this clip, this Fire B clip here, that's the bad clip. And you can either just remove that clip or edit out that bad frame and see if you can share your project and export it out. That's one of the easiest things to do, is just replace that clip, especially if it's just some random B-roll, some secondary footage. You might have another clip you can easily replace it with. That's kind of what I usually recommend doing. It's a very fast way to get it out. Now, if it's a extremely important clip, you may have to go and actually find what happened to this frame. Why did it go bad? You may even have to edit out this one specific frame here, which you can use Command plus a couple times, zoom all the way into where that bad frame is. You can hit the letter B to activate your blade tool and cut right around that frame, select it, and delete it. Okay, so that's the first thing, is if you get an error message with that 100008, or really any alert here when you're trying to share, if it has a frame number in it, That's how you can go and locate that frame using under preferences, command comma, change under general time display to frames, and you'll be able to find that exact frame that is bad and edit it out. Now, if you're in the second category of people that are getting an error similar to this, where it's saying that you're getting a render error, but it doesn't tell you which frame has gone bad, this is where you have to start doing some searches and some investigating. And I recommend starting with a split half search. If you have no idea what clip is bad, start with a split half search. And what does that mean? Well, in your project here, right now we're set to the frames time code view. So I have 2100 frames here. So about 2000 frames. A split half search means export or share the first half of your project and see if you get the error message. So I'm going to export roughly the first 1000 frames and see if I get an error. The way to do that is set an in and out point in your project. Just go to the beginning with your skimmer or your playhead, hit the letter I, then go about 1000 frames in or halfway. Make sure you know exactly where you're going to because you want to know where you've exported and where you haven't. Hit the letter O to set an out point. And notice now we have this yellow bounding box here. This yellow range has been selected, which is the first half of the project. You can now go up to the share menu, choose the way that you were sharing, whether it be to YouTube or maybe a master file or another option. And because we've set that range, we can see here in the settings at the bottom of the share window, it's only sharing the first 31 seconds, which is that range we selected. So go ahead and do that. Share that first half of the project, going through the exact same steps, and see if you get the alert message that you got before. If you do get the alert message, that means somewhere in the first half of your project is the bad portion or the bad clip. If you don't get that alert, then most likely the bad frame is in the second half of your search or your project here. So the next step is to use that range selection and try exporting a different section or maybe a little bit more of your project and start to narrow it down. So as an example, if this first part shared without an issue, I then might go to the end of my range here, hit the letter I, and then go halfway through the project here and hit the letter O. So now I've already tested the first half. Now I'm testing the second quarter here of the project. Go ahead and go up to share, export it, share it out how you have chosen your settings, and see if you get the error message. If you do get the error, you know then that most likely in this range is where that bad clip is. And you can continue to repeat this step and narrow down until you've found the bad clip, which if I know somewhere in this Fire B clip is the bad portion of it, I can then hit the range selection tool and start narrowing it down inside of that clip. Now, I know what you might be saying. This sounds like a lot of work, and yes, it is. That's the annoying part when you have a project. This is a short project. This is only like a minute long, and there's 2,000 frames in it. If only one of those frames is bad, this is how we can start to narrow down and find where that bad frame is. So that's what I recommend as the second step. If you have a specific frame in the error, go to that frame and fix the clip. If you don't have a specific frame listed in your error message, use this split half search as a way to narrow down fairly quickly to the error that's having a problem, or the clip that's triggering that error message there. Now, the next portion of this is how do you actually fix the bad clip? Once you've found the frame that's bad or the clip that's gone bad, how do you fix that clip? And I mentioned earlier, you can go and just replace the clip, just delete it and put something else in its place, and that is usually one of the easiest ways to fix it. But if you know you have a bad clip, you have to figure out where the clip is actually bad. So in this Fire B clip here, as I go through it and skim through it, right at this point, about 3/4 of the way through this clip, notice here in the viewer, this clip is all kinds of distorted. There's some green artifacts coming in here and all these compression markers. It's not a clean flame like it is at the beginning here. Now it is. It's a fire with a bunch of sparks and everything, so it looks kind of glitchy, but notice right here we get some just major glitching happening on the clip. So I know that when this clip was originally created and came off the camera, it did not have those glitches. So somewhere in between it getting into this project and the camera, those glitches and artifacts were introduced. So you want to start to go back in the timeline here, starting in the timeline, go back through the different steps to figure out where did that clip go bad and how can we fix it. So in this case, the first thing is I see here on the timeline, it's got the glitches. So what I'm going to do is control click or right click on this clip and choose the bottom option here, reveal in browser. Shift F is the shortcut there, and that'll go and highlight the clip in the browser. So looking in the browser, I can skim through this clip and play it and see if it has the same problem. And in this case, it's some glitches, but you might see some other kind of problem with the clip. This kind of general process here works with all of them. But I can see here in the browser, I also see the distortion and those glitches. So I know my source clip here in Final Cut inside the browser is also showing those glitches. Now, it could be an issue with maybe a proxy file or some optimized media. There might be a difference there. So you can go up to the View menu at the top right corner, and you have an option here to view optimized or proxy media. Proxy is usually lower quality files. So if it's on proxy, switch it to optimized. See if you have the same problem with the optimized media. If you don't see the glitches here in the browser, but you do see them in your project, you might be able to figure out that you have a bad render file in the actual file that's here. So if that's the case, you can go up to the File menu, and there's an option to delete generated files. And it might say generated event files, it might say generated library files, depends on what you have selected back here. If I select the library, it'll say delete generated library files, or if it's the event, it'll say delete generated event files. So you can narrow down what you want to delete. If you're unsure, you can just do the library. That's going to delete more things. Otherwise, you can delete just the event stuff here. But under the File menu, if you go to the Delete Generated Files, we do see an option here that says to delete the render files. And anytime you see the word delete, make sure you understand the consequences of it. With render files, as long as we have that original media, we can always re-render our projects. So if your original media in the browser does not have those glitches on it, it's possible that when Final Cut was rendering the files, that's when those artifacts got introduced. If that's the case, check off this delete render files, and you want to change this to all so it deletes those render files in your project. And then once you do that, Final Cut will go and allow you to re-render the project. Notice at the top of this project, I see all these dashed lines at the top here. That means that clip is unrendered or needs to be rendered. And then to re-render it, I can either select just the one clip that's here and go up to the Modify menu, and there's a render selection, or you could choose to render all. One thing, just kind of a little side note here, I am a big fan of background rendering in most cases, and I do see a lot of people saying that they're having issues with the background rendering. If you do, one tip I have, go into your preferences, Final Cut preferences with Command comma, go into the playback tab, and that's where you're going to have background rendering. If you have this enabled and it's giving you issues, change it from 0.3 seconds to maybe 5 seconds, maybe 3 or 5 seconds. What that means is that with you not doing anything, if you step away from the machine or maybe you switch over to your email, different app to check it, after 5 seconds, Final Cut will start the background rendering. For some reason, I've been seeing it set at 0.3 seconds as the default, and that seems to cause all kinds of errors because in 0.3 seconds, I mean, you stop frequently for 0.3 seconds to do something. And so Final Cut is just always trying to start that background rendering, and I think that causes a lot of the issues people are seeing. But 5 seconds seems to be a good point to have there. So once it re-renders, you can play back your file, see if you get the same error. In this case, I can see those glitches are there. I see they're up here, so the render files were not causing the issue in that case. So the next step is to look at our media files and see where it's coming. If I know in the browser here it's got those glitches, what I'm going to do is control click or right click and choose reveal in Finder. You can also use the shortcut Shift Command R. By revealing this clip in the Finder, we are now taking files and taking stuff into our own hands. So be careful when you're doing this, because now we're going into the actual files. And if we delete something here, we could be permanently deleting that file, and that can cause all kinds of problems. Now, when you're dealing with these Finder files here, you don't have to do this, but I usually recommend going into Final Cut and quitting Final Cut. Doesn't seem to have a big issue if you keep it open, but occasionally I see people have problems with things not updating in Final Cut because they have it open. So I usually quit it there. So this file here, fireb.mp4, is the actual file, the movie file that Final Cut is looking at. I can see at the bottom here, I have my path bar enabled, which let me zoom out here. You can go up to the view menu and there's an option to show the path bar. I like the path bar because it gives you the exact path of this file. So looking at the right here, this FireB clip is stored in original media, stock media, which is in my stock library, the Final Cut library, in movies, my home folder, users, Macintosh HD, right? So this shows you exactly where that file is. I can look at the information on the right side here and see that this is actually an MP4. It is not an alias. It's not pointing to another file. This is the actual video clip that Final Cut is using to play back this clip. So if I hit the space bar, I can quick look this file or double click on it and open in QuickTime. And as I'm watching this clip, I'm looking to see if the problem is still there. And looking at this clip, yeah, there it is. I can see all those glitches, the green artifacts and the distortion are visible here in the QuickTime file, in the file that Final Cut is referencing. So that tells me that those glitches are not being caused by Final Cut. They're not being caused by a render file or a project that's gone bad or anything like that. I'm starting to narrow down what's causing this problem. And in this case, my source media file that's here has the problem. So in this case, I would want to go back to wherever I got this footage from and get that original media clip to replace this one here with it. So I already have it. It came off of a memory card from a camera. So I'm going to do Command N here to create a new window so that we can see this. And I believe I have that on my external SSD here. I just called it Fire A, so it would be easy for me to find. If I hit the space bar, I can quick click this one, and as I scrub through all of this, notice those green artifacts and all the distortion does not come up in this other clip here. So it looks like Fire A is going to be the clip that I want to use. So here in the original media, I'm going to select my Fire B clip. I'm going to use Command Delete to move this to the trash. If you want, just to be safe, move it to your desktop or somewhere else temporarily. And then I can bring in Fire A here and replace that clip. Now, the name does matter. So I am going to change this to Fire B so it matches the name of the media file that Final Cut is looking for. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to close out these Finder windows. I'm going to use Command Space to bring up Spotlight. Start typing in Final Cut, hit Return. That quickly goes and launches Final Cut Pro. And we should be back in business. We shouldn't have to do anything else because we matched the name of that media file. Notice here in the browser, if I skim through this clip, we don't see any of those artifacts. If I go down into my project and skim through it, here we do see one of the artifacts showing up here in this file, right? So in that case, we want to get that fixed. So our Fire B clip looks okay. We do want to get it fixed down here. Now you might be thinking, okay, I'll just go up here, grab the clip and drop it down. But if you remember, we rendered this clip. So most likely we just have a bad render file. So I can go up to File, delete the generated event files. I'm going to delete all my render files again, hit OK. And let's see if we skim through this clip. Yeah, notice skimming through it here, we don't see any of those artifacts that are there. I can have the clip selected, go up to the modify menu and render the selection. And we'll see if we get that error again. And this is kind of backtracking to what I said earlier. This is why deleting those render files can be helpful if the render file is bad, which we saw in this case it was. By deleting the render file, we are then essentially allowing Final Cut to fix itself, and you're not having to go through and spend a whole bunch of time re-editing it or replacing your clips or anything like that. All right, so that is kind of what I wanted to show with these errors that you might get. Just to summarize, if you see an error message that looks like this, check to see if it has a specific frame number. And if it does have a frame number, change your Final Cut preferences under General to show frames, and then you can find that bad frame and what clip has gone bad. If you don't have a frame number, like we're seeing here, use I and O to set a range. You can also use the range selection tool by hitting the letter R to select the first half of your project. Share it out, see if you get the error. If you do, narrow it down again and keep narrowing down your ranges to find the specific clip or frame that's causing the issue, and then determine how you can fix that clip. If it's a clip like we had with this Fire B clip, see if it plays back and has an error or a glitch in your timeline here. If it does, control click on it, choose reveal in browser or shift F, check out the clip in the browser. If that looks bad, control click, right click on it, reveal it in the Finder. Take a look at the Finder clips that are out here. Just be careful when you go into the Finder because this is the original media, and if you do delete that, you might not be able to get it back if you don't have a backup. And then, yeah, that's kind of how we go through and narrow down to figure out what's having a problem. And again, yes, that can take time, but it is worthwhile if you've just spent hours and hours and hours editing, and all you want to do is get this published and sent up to the web there, wherever you're trying to share it. Cool, so I hope that answers it. One other tip about sharing, if you're having issues going up here and sharing to one of these destinations, whether it be publishing to YouTube or sharing it to an Apple device, one simple troubleshooting step you can use is just sharing out as a different, to a different shared destination here. So a lot of times I like to, when I'm having issues with people, I like to have them shared as a master file. And under the settings, make sure that you're sharing it with the format as video and audio, which is under mastering here. This just tries to send out the original clip. You can use the source file, or you can try changing it to H.264. A lot of times these simple options for sharing can help us narrow down what's causing an issue too. So just check that out. If in this case, this error 10,008 that was coming up here, this person was trying to share it to YouTube when it failed. And so it could be just an issue with YouTube and on their side and not anything to actually do with your project. And so just kind of stepping back into your project before you go through all of those troubleshooting steps to split half search, you might just try sharing it as a master file and make sure that under settings, it is set to video and audio for mastering, and either use the source codec or try switching it to H.264 or vice versa. And just see if you can share out a file, because that helps you narrow down, again, is it something related to your project or is it related to the destination that you've selected? And that can be Facebook, YouTube, it can even be sharing it to Apple devices or one of those other options there. Okay, so that's the first topic that I wanted to kind of cover in today's stream here. The second topic I want to cover is related to background noise and how you can kind of correct that or fix that. And just some, this is all going to be more on the beginner side, just some kind of general starting points for audio correction. So the person that was having this issue, they actually sent me this clip here where they are driving around in a car. This car has a louder engine, so you hear some background audio noise, but the car is also being driven on what seems to be a faster street. So just driving faster, the pavement noise from the tire, you get a lot of that noise in there. So just to give you an example of some of this noise, I'm going to play between this little quick section here, and you'll hear this, hopefully. I don't see that coming out here, so give me 1 second. I want you to be able to hear this, because the whole point is working with the audio. So let me make sure I get my sound out to you. There we go. I had the wrong output, but now we should have this. Let's try it again. Yeah, I think you can hear it there. So, so this person is driving around and just kind of, you can hear that background hum and the tire noise that's there.
That film is, I guess it's quite sensitive. So what you want to do...
You can hear as he's talking, we still hear that background noise that's there. And this, I know this can be harder to hear over the web here, but just know that this noise that's here is something that's very common for people to have and to work with. Now, with the clip selected, I actually had my noise removal enabled already on here. So let me step back. Let me try playing it again. We'll see if we can see it. Oh yeah, there you go. That was with it removed.
That film is, I guess it's quite sensitive. So
yeah, so notice how and it's very bassy too. It's very rumbly. It's very distracting. So the whole point is trying to limit that and get rid of that. Now, similar to what we were dealing with an error message coming up and sharing, you had to go back to the original media. That's the same thing here. Before even getting started, this is just, we already recorded this, we're done. But if you can, starting with the recording equipment is the best place. If you have great mics that can eliminate that noise and take that out, and your mic placement and everything, all of those things are really important, and you can fix a lot of your problems before you even get here to Final Cut and to get into editing by having a setup that works really well. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the case for everyone, so just even while you're shooting, keep in mind that someone does have to edit this later, and so you can do a couple tricks and couple things to actually help those people out. And one of those things is just having the camera and the setup and the microphone recording the audio and the noise without you talking at all. This clip, I think it was just a smaller clip that the person sent me, so they may have a longer segment that is just the noise of them driving around. That is very helpful noise because you can use that in a number of ways, and one of them is to hear that noise and be able to eliminate it with some noise removal tools. So I was only able to find about 2 seconds of the clip here that I could use for removing the sound and kind of isolating it while the person was driving. But that's something that if you can just record for 30 seconds or so, that solid noise, that'll help you back here in the post side. Now, with the clip selected, go up to your inspector, and specifically, you have all the different inspector tabs here. Go to the audio inspector here, which is this little speaker. And in the audio inspector, there's a whole section here called Audio Analyst. And if you click on it, there'll be like an Analyze button if you haven't done it yet. But this will just be basically Final Cut's auto tools to try and find issues with your audio. And it can do a great job in removing things. You just hit this little magic wand, and it'll go through and analyze and then fix those problems. You can press the show button to the right of this to see what it's actually fixing. So a lot of times it takes quieter clips, makes them louder. In this case, we're doing some noise removal. You can have hum removal, all kinds of things here that it goes and fix. Now, I'm going to play this back and just change the noise removal amount.
That film,
you can see with none, it's very rumbly. It's hard to hear. Take it all the way up.
You want to use a glass cleaner.
And you can barely hear that background noise now. The engine is still there. There's still that motor noise because that's kind of unique sound, but the general noisiness that's back there has been removed by raising that amount there. Now, sometimes when you mess with these audio controls, they do impact the way that your voice sounds, and other sounds are impacted. So that's why you're going to have to play with that. It's not just like, okay, go and make this 100% and you're fixed. You're going to have to mess with these and kind of work with them. So that's the first way, and the easiest way in many cases to get rid of noise is just using these built-in audio enhancement tools here inside of Final Cut. Now, video editing with Final Cut Pro, kind of a professional level. You're not using iMovie, you're not using something really basic to edit this stuff. You've gotten up into more advanced tools. It also works the same way with audio editing. So you have tools like GarageBand and Logic Pro and many other apps specifically designed around audio editing, and that's an entire industry. So you can spend years just learning about how to fix audio, but these are some quick tools that you can use here. Now, if you do want to learn more about audio editing, I strongly recommend getting into it because Final Cut actually accesses a lot of the effects and the plugins that are available in Logic in the professional audio world here inside of Final Cut. So you might see some other tutorials telling you to do this, this, and this to remove background audio, and they might have audio effects. So you can do that here in Final Cut by going into your effects browser. Over here on the right side of the toolbar, just hit that effects browser tab, and on the left column, go down to the audio effects. And there's a whole second category here for audio effects. And you can use these to manipulate the audio, make changes to the audio. But notice on the right side here, there are categories for these effects. One of them is going to be Final Cut. If we scroll down a little bit of ways here, these are all the Final Cut plugins for audio. And they work really well, and they're designed around more the video editing workflow. But if you go down to Logic, you'll see a Logic section here. These are designed around an audio editing workflow, but they still work really well here inside of Final Cut as well. So you might go in here and get something like a de-esser or the denoiser, all kinds of other things in here. But if you get one of these plugins, you can click and drag this onto your audio clip, let go of it. And then if you go up into the inspector under the audio inspector, in addition to our audio enhancements, notice now we have the denoiser that's been added, and you can start to work with this denoiser using the presets here on the right side. You can open up the parameters if you'd like, but before you do that, I recommend hitting this little icon here because this brings up the actual tool and what it looks like inside of Logic. So if you're used to Logic and used to the audio editing world, this is what those plugins look like, and you can start to work with and edit the audio this way. So that takes me to one last step here before I'm going to show you another tool, is you can look for Logic tutorials and other kind of tools out there to find how to use these. So it's the denoiser in this case is that plugin or effect or add-on for audio. This is what you'd want to search for when you're looking through the web to learn more about these tools there. But they're all in there. You can just drag them on and add them. Use the checkbox on the left side of any of these effects, just like you would with video effects, to enable or disable that effect and hear what it sounds like, and then determine what works the best for you. The other thing that you can do if you really want to get into using Logic and using the professional audio apps is you can send your project to Logic. You can just send the whole thing over there and edit it in Logic. And the way that you would do that is go up to the File menu, and there's an option to export XML. Hit Export XML, and it'll ask you where you want to save that. I'm just going to save it on the desktop. And it's saving this project XML. I'm going to quit Final Cut, and I'm going to open up Logic. And what an XML file is basically a little script file that allows you to link all of those media files and everything between apps, in this case Final Cut and Logic. When you open Logic, if you're new to it, just double click on the empty project option, and you can select an option here to create the first track. Every project has a track in it. Doesn't really matter what we select here for this. We're going to delete the track anyway. So I'll just hit create. Let me shrink down the window a little bit so we can see the whole interface here. And what you're going to want to do is go up to the File menu, go down to import and choose the option that says import Final Cut XML. And you'll notice I don't get that option here, and you may not either. This is an advanced workflow that we're using here. And Logic, if you go up to the Logic preferences under General, Logic actually has a couple modes kind of built in. So you're going to go into the preferences, and under the Advanced tab, check this box that says Show Advanced Tools. When you do this, this changes the interface. This starts to make Logic even more advanced than it already is. But one of the things that it adds is under the File menu, under Import, we now get an option that says to import that Final Cut Pro XML. All right. And if I've already lost you, I get it. This is a complex problem, kind of workflow here and problem to fix. But if we import that Final Cut XML, it's going to bring up a window asking me to navigate to it. I'll choose that one that I exported to the desktop, hit import. It asks me about the frame rate and everything. I'm going to hit switch. I'm going to hit 2997 to match up my project. You'll want to follow the messages there, read them, and make sure you're making the most informed decision there. But I hit import, and then you'll notice that's it. I have my audio track here inside of Logic now. I can delete the audio 1 track from before. This is my dialogue roll that came over from Final Cut that has that audio in it. If I play this back, you can hear that audio. Might not be able to hear it because of Logic settings for the output, but that's the audio from that project. Yeah, essentially this is Logic, and you would go through and edit this track and add on those various functions there. You can go in and bring up the library, bring up the inspector. Under the inspector, for example, we'd go down to the track that we're trying to edit, and we can add on various effects, just like we were doing inside of Final Cut. You can add on these effects and these plugins, but because you're in Logic, you have a lot more control of how those are going to sound and how that works here. So once you're done inside of Logic, and unlike Final Cut, it doesn't have the same autosave function, so make sure you're using Command S and saving your project as you go. But once you're done here, you can go up to Final File, go down to Export, and then it says Export Project to Final Cut Pro XML. So going from Logic back to Final Cut is basically the same steps we used initially. You're going to export this XML. I'm just going to call it from Logic in this case. I'm going to save it on the desktop, and we get this here. You have some options here to export it as a compound clip if you want to. You could include the video in the export if you wanted to. Kind of all up to you. I'm going to do it as a compound clip and hit save without the video. And I'll show you what this looks like. So then it's exporting those tracks. It's done. I can do Command Q to quit this. Let's just save this project, and then let's go into Final Cut. Command space, start typing in Final, and hit return, and then I'll go and launch Final Cut Pro. And here in Final Cut, we're not done yet. We haven't brought that XML back. We do have to import that in. So I'm going to go up to File, Import, and you'll see an option for XML. And then we can select that new XML that came out. This says for Logic, and actually should say from Logic. So let me rename this. And import. And it lets us know that this has a different color processing mode than the original one. Not a big deal here. Should be fine. Hit continue. And then it created this event that's separate here, but here is that compound clip. And if I double click on it, I can see those various audio tracks that it's brought in. And let me use the history back button here. I could just drag this compound clip down into my project. And if I wanted to, I could mute everything else, but then there's that from Logic audio track that's there. So that's how you can do a round trip from Final Cut to Logic, use all those plugins and tools over there, and then come back to Final Cut. All right, so hopefully that is kind of a little bit understandable. That's a very professional workflow that's done, so I don't expect most individuals to do that. This is kind of what you would do to send that XML and that project over to an audio editor. They would clean everything up for you and then send that back. Thank you for the thumbs up and for the shout out there in the comments. We always like having you, especially from all the way over in Australia. It's fun to have you in on the show today. All right, so then one other tool that I want to call out is if Final Cut and Logic and all these tools don't get it done for you, there's another tool that I've used in the past. This is not a paid endorsement or anything like that, but you can take your clip into an app called SoundSoap, which I have found to work fairly well, and you can get a free trial of this app to try it out yourself. But the way that SoundSoap works is it actually will go through, and these controls here are designed specifically around removing noise. So we could go in and get our clip and bring it into SoundSoap and then edit it, remove the audio, and try to get rid of that. Now again, SoundSoap works best if you have a longer portion of just the noise you're trying to remove. So if you can have that 30 seconds or so of just the noise itself playing without your vocal there and in your voice, you're going to have a better experience in removing that background noise. So this one, I think we were around like a minute or so is where there was the pause. Let me play this here. Yeah, right here we have roughly 1 or 2 seconds of noise that is that background noise. So what I can do here in SoundSoap is click on the Learn button and then let go of it. And what it's doing is trying to learn where the noise is and then remove it. So now if I play this back and hit noise only, this is the noise that it's trying to remove. And you can then start to adjust this with the noise tuner and the noise reduction amount that's here. And this is, right now what I'm using is the trial, the free version of it. This is SoundSoap Solo. This is their least expensive version. They have more professional options that can do more. So try those out, especially with the free trial. It's kind of a great way to start out and work here. Now, again, this is not a sponsorship. This is not an endorsement for the app or anything. And this is something that you would have to do completely outside of Final Cut before you go back into the app itself. So it's not the most ideal workflow, but if you can't go back and re-record the clip and you just absolutely have to have it, this can be a time saver to go and remove that noise. And then once it's removed, you go up to the file menu and I believe you just hit save, and it should save that media and that file. And then you could re-import that into Final Cut or relink the Final Cut. Relink the file to your Final Cut library. Similar to what we did earlier with renaming that one clip and replacing the original media. So that's another way that you can go in and remove noise. If you kind of didn't follow a lot of those steps and you don't know what to take away from this, the one thing I would say to take away is that audio is very complex. And there's not just a simple button that's going to fix everything on it. You do have, inside of Final Cut, we do have those auto tools that actually work fairly well, but you have to go in and analyze the clips and then enable the noise reduction to remove that background noise. If that doesn't remove and fix the audio that you're hearing there with this noise removal option, that's where most likely you're going to have to go into some pretty advanced tools to get it removed. So just be prepared for that as you look at tools that are out there. Like I said, Logic is the professional audio app from Apple that works fairly well, but you have to have the knowledge and the understanding to use those plugins and use those effects there to get that noise removed. Otherwise, there's options like SoundSoap, and I'm sure there's tons of other apps out there that you can go and discover. Most likely, they are going to be apps you have to pay for. Like SoundSoap, that's one that I like because it just seems to work really well. But if you do find something that works better, and you have something that is a great tool that you're like, no, don't use this, you can use this one instead, go ahead and put that down in the comments. Let us know. We like to see what those apps are and test them out. Everything I've shown you today, because you're using Final Cut Pro, you're using a Mac, so all these tools, SoundSoap and everything, Logic, is all going to work on Mac OS. I am also in the latest version of the operating system, so this is all the current stuff, the new stuff that's out there. So I hope you had a good time in the show today. We will be posting a replay of this a little bit later, but make sure to put those questions that you have down into the chat. Let me know what you want to see next. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to be notified next time we go live. We might do it again tomorrow. We'll see. And if you haven't checked it out either, we have a full course that I just posted that used to be a paid course, but now it's a free course there on YouTube, going from not even having Final Cut to exporting a project. So if you're looking for the full course, go and check that out as well. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day.